Welcome back. It's Dr. Ed Ernstrom here with Ernstrom Spinal Rehab. I'm just really excited to get back into another week of Get Moving Wednesdays. Right now, as we were just talking about on Monday with getting motivated, that we wanted to get stress out of our lives. So one of the ways that we're trying to do that today, and this may seem like talking about getting moving, we're going to move some shoulders, we're going to move some elbows, we're going to do some rotation of our torso, some exercises or something like that. But really what I want to talk about is something that people aren't moving enough, and that's called our diaphragm. Our diaphragm is the main breathing muscle that we need to be using so that we can fill our lungs full of oxygen, and when it relaxes, it helps push all the oxygen back out through our mouth and our nose. Now, majority of the people out there, probably 9 out of 10 people, this is not an exaggeration, I did some research today, and the majority of the people that I listened to and read from, the majority of the people say, in general, if you get a room of about 100 people, almost 90 out of the 100 will have this problem, where they are what we call shoulder and neck breathers or vertical breathers. So I'm going to have my son come over here for a break. Okay, my son, he didn't know that I was going to put him to work today, but all I want you to do is just take a big deep breath in and breathe out. Another big deep breath in and breathe out. Now, what I'm going to illustrate here while he's doing this, just keep breathing in and out. Big ones, okay? Notice that his shoulders are slightly going up and down with those deep breaths. Now, he's also a trombone player, so he should know better. So you need to keep those shoulders down, and we're going to breathe through your belly down, okay? Just like you play trombone, okay? Just as much air coming in, but more relaxed up top. All right, thanks. So, it's the difference between vertical breathing and horizontal breathing is the difference of whether we're going to use our diaphragm or not. Now, when we're all born, you watch babies and toddlers and see how they breathe. They walk around, they got their belly kind of walking around, poking out, and they're napping, and all of a sudden you see that belly go up and down, in and out. So if we start out that way, what happened to the 90% when only 10% still use their belly to breathe? Something happened in development, and it became an acquired habit or classically trained habit. There's a few different reasons that are thought why that happened. Number one is that it's usually somewhere between age 5 to 10, this usually flips the other direction and becomes more of a vertical breather. And that usually happens, what happens between age 5 and 10. You go from being in kindergarten to then all of a sudden sitting in desks a little bit longer, and then you get to 4th and 5th grade and you're sitting in desks a lot of the time. And again, we have kids nowadays that are being raised on devices, and they're constantly hunched forward and sitting. So they're not giving their diaphragm a lot of room to fill up and breathe. So what do? They're going to take those deep breaths through their shoulders and through their neck. Now, another reason why, here I got notes here, I want to make sure I'm reading this appropriately. Okay, so going to school. Another thing is that, how many different times do you take a child to a medical doctor for checkups? And the medical doctor does something that is appropriate, and they should be using these. They're called a stethoscope, and they put the stethoscope on their chest, and they say, take a deep breath while they're pushing on there. So that gives them not just a verbal cue into their ear, but also a tactile mechanical stimulus that say, take a deep breath. And since they're listening to that part, they're going to think they're going to want to chest breathe. So they're going to take that big chest breath, and they're going to go, and they're just doing these big breaths, and so they get another verbal cueing. Now again, that's not a lot of opportunity because they usually shouldn't be more than once a year, but sometimes kids get sick and the parents don't know anything else to do other than take them to urgent care or ERs, and they get seen quite often, right? Other things is that not the most appropriate training purpose, but unfortunately our society has been a little too negative and judgmental and poking in the belly if somebody has a little belly fat on them. And so that poke eventually, creates that stimulus that, this is something that we don't want. And, if you're abdominally breathing, that means that as you breathe in, that belly will stick out. And so we've been trained to think that having this belly that might stick out is something that's undesirable. So then we constantly tighten up our abdominal muscles, and then the only way to get any kind of air from here, because you can't allow these lower ribs to expand and horizontally swing up and out just like a bucket handle would, that if these aren't moving and these are constantly tight down through here, the next place that we can use is these accessory breathing muscles in our neck to lift our shoulders up, and using our SEMs and our traps and our scalenes to do a lot of that, which then leads me to my next point. For using all of these accessory muscles for breathing, what conditions can that lead to? It could lead to headaches. It can lead to excessive degeneration that might get accelerated due to inhibited motion in our neck. We might also get just tight muscles in the neck that will be irritating. Also may lead to some chronic shoulder issues, because if these muscles are too tight, that means the collarbone and the shoulder blade itself won't have good motion, because these are already stiff and tight and aren't going to be able to allow for good shoulder elevation and depression. Many different disorders. And so what I'm trying to get back at is that we need to get back into proper breathing, and that's called diaphragmatic breathing. Now there's a couple different ways that you can actually do this for yourself. Simply, we need to first recognize what it feels like to take a belly breath in. Now imagine that air is going to go into your mouth and is going to push down on that diaphragm, or that diaphragm is actually going to contract. And when it contracts and tightens, it actually pulls downward. And so as it's pulling down here, that's going to push our organs out a little bit. But that's okay. We want that, because as that goes down, air is going to be sucked in with negative pressure, sucking air in. Now, when that diaphragm relaxes and that belly then goes back in, that's forcing the air up and out and blowing. Okay? So that's what we want to have that illustration. In, filling the big balloon, and then breathing out, just goes in and air goes out. So, other takeaway to come from this too, as relating back to my video on Monday, stress. Holding that glass of water is a symbolism of holding onto stress. And one of the best ways to let go of stress is to control our autonomic nervous system voluntarily. That sounds like a contradiction. Autonomic means involuntary, or runs by itself without us thinking about it. So heart rate, respiration, digestion, things like that, brain function, all of the cell activity, that's just kind of done without us thinking. Bending my arm, blinking my eyes if I choose to, all those things are what we call voluntary. So there's a relationship here that I want to work with here. Now, there's a nerve that is crucial and controls most of our autonomic nervous system, especially our rest and digest, and to a certain extent some of our sympathetic or fight and flight. And that's called the vagus nerve. Now that vagus nerve, I'm going to get in here, comes right from inside our skull. It's a cranial nerve number 10 for my students, that comes out right through here, comes down the neck, and you have one on both sides that comes right through here, down and into the chest cavity, and comes down and attaches to the lungs, the heart, the organs, and is responsible for all of these things. So if we're ever in a position where we need to run from a tiger in the jungle or a bear in the woods, it would be important for you to increase your heart rate, right? And to increase your respiration and shunt blood from your organs to your limbs so you can run away really fast. Then your adrenal gland so you can get cortisol and epinephrine going, right? But then on top of that, there's no off button to your sympathetic or your fight or flight system, so you actually have to overcome it by stimulating your parasympathetic system, which is rest and digest. So now that also, because the vagus nerve controls the the respiration and heart rate, we can actually, it will start to slow that down, but you have to overcome the epinephrine and the cortisol first. Now, how can we do that? Well, we can actually use a different nerve called the phrenic nerve, which actually is the nerve that goes from our nerves that come out of our neck and actually go down into our cavity and then cuts through our diaphragm and attaches to the bottom of our diaphragm. And that controls the voluntary contraction of our diaphragm. So if you're having a panic attack, or if you're feeling like you're hyper ventilating and can't control your breath, if we can actually get to the point where we can control the contraction of our diaphragm and slowly let it back out, that in itself, that slower respiration sends a signal to the brain that, hey, we're not running from anything right now, so that we can reduce our heart rate, we can reduce our blood pressure, we can put blood back from our limbs and back into our organs for digestion. So there's this huge component here. Now, just to give you a list, I'm not going to go through them today. Maybe we'll go through them in another video. But a few different techniques, and I can list off a few, at least one really good resource that I found recently. It's the Limhoff or Winhoff method of breathing. He's got a YouTube station with some breathing practices that will take you through big, fast, in breathing, out breathing, but just very cyclical, never holding your breath between your breaths. And you're going to do that for about 30 seconds or 30 respirations. And then you're going to hold your breath for about 30 seconds and then breathe out. And then you do that same undulation back and forth with your breathing for about 11 minutes in that video. And you'd be surprised on actually how euphoric you will get. You'll get this beautiful rush, but also a deep relaxation that will come on the back end of it. Now, there's another technique that's called the 4, 7, and 8. What you do is you actually breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 7, and then breathe out for 8. If you can't breathe out for 8, if you even get to 6, then you're doing pretty good, okay? And then breathe back in for 4, hold it for the 7, and then breathe out for that 6 to 8 seconds. And just keep doing that. And that's a really good practice you can do right before bed, so that you can actually, again, calm down that autonomic nervous system, get the parasympathetic, get the rest and digest going, which will slow down your heart rate, and then you should be able to fall asleep a lot faster. Now, there's another thing that with breathing that I wanted to get into, that with exercise. Now, we've been having some issues and stuff with somebody that I've been running with, that she has an issue that she can't keep her breath controlled, and she starts coughing, and she ends up getting into a point of hyperventilating almost while running, and then gets frustrated because she just wants to keep running, and the breathing is a problem, and then she has to stop and walk, and that is a lot of added stress while you're in a active activity. So you have cortisol, you have epinephrine on top of that, and that will lead to hyperventilating. So the idea that it's a term that I've been thinking about in my head for a bit now, that I call quiet running or quiet breathing while running. And I was watching a few experts about breathing and running as well, and the majority of them get to a point where you find a cadence where you can either breathe in for 3 seconds for 3 steps, and then breathe out for 3 steps for 3, and then breathe in for 3 steps and breathe out. And that is more for a casual run. Now, if you're getting into a more of a moderate run where you're picking up the pace, maybe race pace for a 5K or 10K, maybe get to a two-step cadence per breathe in and 2-step cadence for breathing out. And I've been also paying attention to my own breathing, and actually I'm almost finding a 1 to 1.5 cadence to breath ratio that's been working for me. So for every, I'll breathe in for about 3 steps, but as I breathe out, I'm probably breathing out within like 5 to 6 steps, 4 to 5 steps. And I just, I follow a cadence, and I pay attention to my breathing, which is actually the number 1 rule to breathing while running, is that you need to not be so mindless while running. You need to be aware so that when you are running, that you're not feeling panicked. Running should be relaxing. And if you're ever running panicked, it's because that bear is chasing you. You're just trying to run faster than the guy next to you so that he gets eaten and you don't. Anyhow, I'm just going to finish with that, just letting you know that diaphragm, and again, all that breathing, if you're vertically breathing while running too, think about how much more extra energy that's using and expanding, and you want all that energy and extra blood sugars and ketones to go to the muscles for running and not for respiration as much. So, and think about vertically breathing through your day. If you're doing this breathing like this, even if it looks like it's only millimeters and you don't feel that shoulder raise, think about doing 1,000 shoulder shrugs a day and how reason why you have tightness in your neck. Let's get back more to the belly breathing and fix that so that we can, one, de-stress, reduce our inflammation, and relax and sleep better. All right, guys, we'll catch you next time. See ya.